The sky over Sector 12 turned orange just before the siren started. Lieutenant Joran Kane, a human field officer, had seen many war zones in his life, but this wasn't supposed to be one of them. Sector 12 was a peaceful border hub between Earth, colonies, and the Elendari Empire. Now it was fire, smoke, and chaos. He ran toward the crumbling medical dome. Inside, the wounded screamed and doctors shouted for more supplies. Joran wasn't a medic, but when he saw the burning wreckage outside the nursery wing, he didn't hesitate. Flames poured out through the shattered glass, and no one dared enter. Everyone thought it was too late, but Joran didn't believe in giving up without trying. He wrapped a thermal shield around his arm, kicked in the last door, and crawled through the thick smoke. The air was burning his lungs, and metal beams crashed behind him. He barely had seconds to find anything alive. Then he heard a cry, faint and high-pitched. It was not human, but it was desperate. Following the sound, he found a small lavender-skinned infant, curled in a cracked pod. The pod was damaged, leaking radiation. The baby's chest barely rose with each breath. Joran scooped the infant into his arms, shielded it with his body, and ran back the way he came. Explosions shook the floor beneath him, but he didn't stop. He only looked down once, and in that second, the baby's bright violet eyes met his. He made it out seconds before the dome collapsed. Fire burst behind him as he rolled across the ground, shielding the child. The air was full of screams and alarms, but he focused on the child now clinging to his jacket. The alien child was warm, quiet, and oddly calm in his arms. An Elendari shuttle landed near him. The ramp lowered, and elite alien guards rushed forward. Their armor shimmered like liquid crystal, and their weapons were raised. But when they saw the infant in Joran's arms, they stopped. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward and scanned the baby with a glowing device. The guard's eyes widened. Without another word, he spoke into his communicator and saluted Joran. Then he ordered the others to stand down. Joran looked confused, but didn't resist when they gently took the baby. A few moments later, they handed the child back to him and motioned for him to follow. He didn't understand, but something told him to obey. The shuttle took off and flew toward a hidden command ship behind the planet's rings. Joran sat holding the baby the whole time. No one spoke. He noticed how everyone treated the child with deep respect, even reverence. This wasn't just any baby. This child was special, but he didn't know how much yet. When the shuttle landed, 2 golden guards escorted him into a grand chamber. Massive pillars carved with glowing runes lined the hall. At the far end stood a tall throne made of crystal and light. Upon it sat a figure more striking than anything Joran had ever seen. Her skin was a deep, smooth violet. Her eyes glowed like galaxies. She wore a crown of pure starlight and armor that shimmered gold and amethyst. She was the Queen of Elendar. She rose slowly, her gaze locked onto the child in his arms, her lips parted as if she couldn't believe her eyes. Then she walked forward, silent and graceful. The guards knelt as she passed. When she reached Joran, she didn't speak immediately. Instead, she placed her hands on the child, who cooed and reached toward her. A tear fell down her cheek as she whispered a single word in Elendari tongue. She looked at Joran and said in perfect English, "You saved my daughter. You entered the fire to bring her back to me. Do you know what that means?" Joran blinked, still catching his breath. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said quietly. The Queen's eyes narrowed, and she smiled faintly. "You are wrong," she replied. "Not anyone would do that. Not even most of my own people." She turned to her guards and gave a quiet order. They bowed and left the chamber, leaving Joran alone with the Queen and the child. The room fell into silence, except for the soft sound of the baby in his arms. Joran looked down at the child again. The baby giggled and reached for his chin. He smiled and let her hold his finger. The queen stepped closer and placed her hand on his. "This was not an accident," she said softly. "You were meant to find her. This was a test to reveal who is worthy of the next step in our future." The alien queen turned and gently took the baby from Joran's arms. Her movements were calm and graceful, yet every guard in the room remained completely still. Joran could feel the tension, but it wasn't fear. It was respect. Deep, ancient respect that seemed to fill the very walls of the golden chamber. The baby reached up to the queen's face and laughed. The queen let her eyes soften and brushed her lips against the child's forehead. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she turned and held the child out toward Joran again. He was confused but accepted her quietly. "She remembers you," the queen said, "and she feels safe with you. That is rare, even for my own kind. You carry no Elendari blood, yet she has claimed you." Joran looked at the child and then at the queen. He had seen many leaders, even kings, but no one had ever spoken to him like this. Before Joran could respond, a soft chime echoed through the hall. A servant entered with robes of silver and blue. The queen raised her hand slightly, and the servant stopped. She looked at Joran again. "You have passed a test that no human has ever faced, and you didn't even know it was a test," she said with a smile. Joran stepped back a little, unsure if this was a reward or a trap. "Your Majesty, I didn't do this for a prize," he said. "I just wanted to save the child." The queen nodded, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke in a voice that was soft but powerful. "In our culture, one who returns a lost royal child becomes part of our line. But in rare times, such a person becomes more than that. He becomes a candidate to stand beside the crown." Joran's breath caught in his chest. He was a soldier, not a politician. He wasn't ready for this. The queen stepped forward again, now only inches from him. Her presence was overwhelming. Her skin shimmered with a deep purple glow, and her scent was like starflowers blooming at midnight. She leaned slightly closer and whispered, "You may think this is about the child, but it is also about you." Joran didn't move. He didn't blink. His thoughts raced in every direction, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. He had expected to be thanked, maybe offered a ride home. But now, standing before this woman who ruled entire systems, he realized nothing about this day was ordinary. The queen raised a glowing hand and touched his temple with 2 fingers. In an instant, memories poured into his mind. Not his own, but ancient ones. Battles fought in the stars. Bonds formed under alien moons. The love of an Elendari ruler, given only once every generation. When she pulled her hand back, Joran gasped. It wasn't pain. It was too much beauty to hold at once. He staggered but didn't fall. The queen smiled at his balance and stepped back. "You see now, this was never random. The moment you saved her, you became part of our fate." Joran finally found his voice. "Why me? I'm no hero. I've made mistakes. I've seen things I don't even talk about." The queen tilted her head, her eyes glowing brighter. "You think we seek perfection, but we seek heart. We seek truth, and you carry both." The baby reached out again, arms toward him. Without thinking, Joran stepped forward and held her once more. She immediately curled against his chest and closed her eyes. The queen's expression shifted from royal calm to something warmer, something real. "Tomorrow, there will be a council," she said. "They will question your place here. They will test you. But know this, my daughter has already chosen, and I do not go against her choice." Joran nodded, unsure of what was coming, but certain he couldn't walk away now. The queen turned, her cape flowing behind her like silk in space. "Until then, rest. You'll have private quarters and food prepared for you. My attendants will answer your questions." Joran watched her leave, still holding the child who now slept quietly in his arms. Alone again, he looked down at the baby's face. She looked so peaceful. He felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not duty. Something deeper, something permanent. Whatever this was, he was no longer just a soldier or just a man. He had become something more. The morning sun on Elendar Prime was unlike anything Joran had seen. It wasn't just light. It was color. A glowing cascade of blue and gold that shimmered across the city's crystal towers. He stood on the balcony of his chamber, holding the queen's daughter in his arms, still trying to understand what his life had become overnight. Attendants brought him clothes stitched from rare star silk and a breakfast that looked like art. Everything was calm, perfect, silent, yet in his chest, a storm was growing. He had not chosen this path, yet every step he took seemed to lead deeper into it. The baby stirred and smiled in her sleep. Guards arrived to escort him. They spoke respectfully, but without warmth. It was clear that while the queen had made her choice, the rest of the Elendari council had not. Joran handed the baby to a caretaker, placed the strange robes over his human uniform, and followed them through towering golden halls. They reached a great chamber with 12 thrones, each holding a figure cloaked in deep robes. The Elendari Council. Their faces were hidden behind masks of silver, their voices layered and echoing, like multiple beings speaking at once. Joran stood in the center as their judgment began. "Human!" The lead voice boomed. "You brought the princess back, and for that, you have earned honor. But honor is not enough for what is being offered. We must know your mind. We must test your heart." Joran didn't flinch. He didn't bow. He just nodded once and waited. A door opened behind him. A projection filled the chamber. It showed Joran's past, his battles, his failures, moments where he'd chosen violence, times he had walked away instead of standing his ground. Every shameful memory was displayed like it was carved into the stars. But then came the other side, the boy he had shielded during a rebel ambush. The old colonist he carried for miles through toxic storms. The message he recorded for a mother whose son didn't make it. The council watched in silence, but Joran saw the flicker of reaction in one of them. "You are not perfect," one said, "but you are real." Another added, "Your strength does not lie in bloodlines, but in choice." A third spoke, "And the princess has chosen you." But the final voice asked, "Would you give your life for this world that is not your own?" Joran didn't hesitate. "I would give my life to protect her," he said. "And if that means standing with her, people, I'll do it." The room went silent again. Then the lights dimmed and a figure walked in. It was the queen. She did not wear her crown now. She came not as ruler, but as a woman. She looked directly at Joran. "There is one more trial," she said. "Not of combat, not of courage, but of truth." She stepped close and placed her hand over his heart. "Let me see who you really are. Let me feel it." Her eyes closed, and for a moment, everything stopped. Joran felt warmth, not like heat, but like memories melting into each other. He saw her pain, her loneliness, the pressure of ruling, and the quiet hope that someone would come without wanting power or glory. He showed her his heart in return, not the brave face, but the broken man who still stood up every day. When she opened her eyes again, there were tears on her face. "It is done," she whispered. "I have seen enough." She turned to the council. "He is chosen, not just by her, not just by fate, but by me." Joran stood still, but something in him broke and healed at the same time. The council rose as one. For the first time in recorded history, they bowed to a human. "So be it," the lead voice declared. "Let it be known across stars and systems. The child savior is now bound to the crown of Elendar." Joran didn't understand all the words, but he knew what they meant. As he left the chamber, the queen took his hand. "You still have time to walk away," she said softly. "But if you stay, you are mine, and Elendar will become yours too." Joran looked back once, saw the baby sleeping peacefully, and then met her eyes again. "I'm not walking away," he said. The queen led Joran through a winding corridor made of starlight crystal. Every step echoed like a song through the glowing walls. She did not speak as they walked, and neither did he. But the silence between them felt full, not empty. Guards and nobles bowed as they passed. The queen wore no crown today, yet her presence was stronger than ever. Without her title, without her armor, she looked more like a woman than a ruler. And that made Joran even more unsure of what he had stepped into. They reached a chamber that shimmered with soft blue light. Flowers with glowing petals floated mid-air, humming with gentle energy. It smelled like rain and moonlight. "This is the Hall of Binding," she said. "Our ancestors built it for vows not of law, but of soul." Joran looked around, half in awe and half in disbelief. Everything felt unreal. A day ago, he was dodging debris in a burning nursery. Now he stood in an ancient ceremonial hall where alien queens chose life partners. He turned to her, unsure if he was dreaming. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly. "Do you truly want this? Or is it only duty?" The queen smiled softly. "Duty brought you to me, but want brought me to this chamber." She stepped closer, her fingers brushing his. Before he could respond, a priestess entered, wearing robes made of liquid silver. Her face was painted in ancient symbols. She carried a crystal orb that pulsed in rhythm with the queen's heartbeat. "Shall we begin?" the priestess asked gently. Joran nodded slowly. "What does the binding involve?" he asked. The priestess looked to the queen, who answered instead. "Not pain, not control, just truth. You will see each other, fully and clearly. And if the bond accepts, you will never break." The priestess placed the orb between them. Light spread from it, wrapping around their hands. Joran felt warmth. Again. But this time it was different. It wasn't just her memories. It was hers and his, joined together in real time. He saw her past, her first flight as a child, her coronation, her lonely nights staring at the stars. And she saw his broken childhood, his first battle, the moment he stopped believing he deserved happiness. Their lives became one single story, flowing together. His breath caught as their emotions intertwined. Love, fear, duty, courage, all flowing through him like a river made of fire and light. He felt her hand tighten around his as the bond deepened. Then suddenly, silence. Total and perfect silence. The orb dimmed. The priestess stepped back. "It is complete," she said. "You are now of her line. Not by name, not by command, but by soul." Joran blinked, unsure how to feel. But the queen stepped closer and placed her forehead against his. "I am yours," she whispered. "And you are mine." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. For all her strength and power, this was a moment of pure vulnerability. Joran lifted her hands and kissed them once, gently. "I don't know what kind of husband I'll be," he said, "but I swear I won't run from you." The queen's eyes shone with a light that no crown could give. "I don't need perfect. I need real," she replied. That night, a message spread across Elendar. The queen had chosen a mate. A human. Soldiers whispered it across barracks. Citizens passed it through glowing scrolls. Some doubted. Some celebrated. But none could deny it had happened. In the days that followed, Joran remained by her side. They spoke often, laughed sometimes, and though he still felt like a stranger in a kingdom of crystal, He no longer felt alone. The baby now called him with giggles, reaching for his chest every morning. The queen watched him closely, always with quiet admiration. Not for his strength, not even for his bravery, but for the way he never pretended to be more than what he was. A man who chose to stay when he could have left. One evening, she walked beside him through the gardens of Elindar, where glowing birds sang in trees made of light. "A storm is coming," she said. "Old enemies stir in the dark. They will test you as they tested me." Joran looked at her, calm and steady. "Let them come," he said. "You didn't choose me because I was strong. You chose me because I never ran. I still won't." Joran woke before dawn to the sound of distant alarms. The peaceful days after the bonding were over. He rushed to the balcony, where he saw dark shapes moving beyond the outer ring of the city. Ships that did not belong to Elindar hovered in tight formations like silent predators. The queen stood in full armor again, the baby now protected in the inner palace. Her calm eyes hid the tension in her voice as she briefed him. "The Takari warlords," she said. "They never accepted my rise to power. Now they come to challenge the future you represent." Joran clenched his fists, remembering stories of the Takari. Raiders, slavers, masters of cybernetic war beasts. They believed strength meant domination, and they hated humans. To them, Joran wasn't just a threat. He was an insult. The queen handed him a ceremonial blade. It glowed with ancient energy and hummed in his grip. "This is not for show," she said. "If the shield breaks and they reach the throne room, you will fight beside me. Not as a guest, not as a consort, as my equal." He nodded without speaking. Something in him had changed. The man who once doubted his place here now stood ready to bleed for it. This city had given him something he didn't know he needed. A reason to belong. A family to protect. The Takari did not wait long. By midday, their ships had opened fire. Elindari defense towers lit up the sky in response. The air cracked with sonic blasts. Civilians were moved underground. Joran watched from the command deck as enemy drop pods rained down. At first, the outer wall held strong. Then, one explosion shook the ground harder than the rest. A single pod breached the inner garden. And from it rose a monster. Part machine, part Takari warrior. Wrapped in armor made of living metal and glowing chains. Guards rushed forward, but the beast tore through them like paper. It roared and charged toward the royal wing. Joran didn't hesitate. He ran to intercept, heart pounding but steps firm. The queen was behind him, but she didn't stop him. She let him lead. They met the creature at the entrance of the hall. Of binding. Joran swung the ancient blade. It clashed against the beast's claws with a sound that cracked the walls. Sparks flew. Blood followed. But not his. The blade cut true. The Takari roared and struck back. Its claws slashed Joran's shoulder, but he didn't fall. He spun, struck again, and kicked the beast into a support pillar. The queen joined him now, her blade dancing in arcs of fire and light. Together, they fought as one. Each move matched the other. She blocked. He struck. He faltered. She caught him. The bond between them was not just emotional. It was physical. It was real. In that moment, Joran understood what being chosen truly meant. The final blow came from him. With a roar, he plunged the blade into the creature's chest. Its body convulsed, then collapsed in a burst of steam and shattered metal. Joran fell to one knee, blood trailing from his arm. But he smiled through the pain. The queen knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his wound. "You stood," she whispered. "You bled for us. You are not just mine. You are ours now." Her voice was soft, but her eyes burned with pride. Soldiers arrived and secured the area. Medics helped Joran to his feet. He waved them off at first, but the queen insisted. "Even warriors must heal," she said. "You proved your place today. Let us prove ours by caring for you." As the night fell, the Takari ships retreated. The battle was not over, but the message was clear. The queen was not alone, and the man at her side would not run. The city lit up in silent tribute to their victory. Joran stood once more on the balcony, his shoulder bandaged, his thoughts steady. Below, people chanted his name in songs he couldn't understand, yet somehow felt in his chest. He didn't just save a child. He had helped save a world, and now that world had started calling him one of their own. Joran's wounds healed faster than expected, thanks to Elendari medicine. Within 2 days, he was walking again, sparring with royal guards, and sitting through war briefings beside the queen. But the peace that followed the attack did not bring rest. The Takari had fallen back, but only to regroup. Spies reported new warships gathering beyond the asteroid belt. They planned to strike again, harder, smarter, and this time, not just the capital was at risk. The entire star system would burn if they weren't stopped. The queen gathered her inner circle. She wore black robes that shimmered like distant stars. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of galaxies. "We must send a message that cannot be ignored. We will go to their space." Gasps filled the chamber. For centuries, no ruler of Elendar had dared enter Takari territory. It was forbidden, dangerous, and deeply symbolic. But she stood firm. "Their leaders want to test my will, so I will walk into their throne world and speak it to their face." Joran didn't hesitate. "I'll go with you," he said. She turned to him slowly, her eyes soft. "You do not have to," she said. "You've already proven your place beside me." But he shook his head. "It's not about proving anymore. It's about protecting what's mine." Within hours, a royal cruiser was prepared. Shaped like a blade and powered by living crystal, it cut across the stars in silence. Only a handful were allowed on board. The queen, Joran, elite guards, and a translator. They moved through dangerous space like a spark through dry leaves. Takari warships shadowed them for hours. Some followed. Some simply watched. But none fired. The queen had sent a single message ahead. "We come in peace, but we will not come weak." It was enough to make them hesitate. They arrived at the Takari throne world. A brutal planet scarred by storms and ringed with old wreckage. The surface was dark and broken, with metal cities crawling across the crust like insects. Joran stepped off the ramp first, his hand never far from his weapon. The queen followed, tall and calm. Her presence was like a flame in the shadows. The Takari lords stood in a half-circle, towering beasts of flesh and steel. Their leader, a giant with a mask fused to his skull, stepped forward. "You are brave to come here," he said, voice rumbling like thunder. "Or foolish." The queen did not blink. "Perhaps both," she replied. "But I did not come to trade threats. I came to offer something greater than war." Joran watched closely as the queen spoke. She spoke not of surrender, but of survival. She spoke of children lost on both sides, of cities burned for pride, of the child she almost lost, and the human who risked everything to save her. She raised her voice then. "You wanted to test me, so I let you. You failed. You could not break me. And now you see what stands beside me. Not a warrior made by your machines, but a man who chose to fight with his heart." The Tekari lords were silent. Then one threw down his weapon. "I lost 2 sons in the first fire," he said. "I don't want to lose a third." Another nodded. Then another. The leader of them all raised a fist, looked at Joran, and lowered his head. "You win nothing today," he growled. "But you lose nothing either. We will speak more, and perhaps next time, not with blades." The queen nodded once. "Then we begin a path none of us have walked before. Let's walk it with care." Joran breathed again only when they boarded. On the ship. His hands still shook from the tension. The queen looked at him and smiled. You stood taller than many today, she said. Even among giants. He smiled back, tired but proud. They returned home not as warriors, but as symbols. Whispers spread faster than fire. The human had walked into the Takari court and walked back out untouched. The queen had spoken peace, and the enemy had listened. Hope returned to the stars of Elendar, and now all eyes looked to what they would do next. The days that followed were quiet, but the kind of quiet that comes after thunder. Elendar was no longer just a shining capital. It had become a symbol of something more. The bond between human and queen was no longer questioned by the people. Joran spent more time among the citizens than behind palace walls. He listened to workers, trained with soldiers, and played with children who had never seen a human before. They offered him fruit, stories, and respect without fear or force. The queen watched from her chambers with growing pride. She had chosen him because of instinct, honor, and hope. But now, she began to feel something deeper, something that had nothing to do with politics, trials, or duty. One night, she invited Joran to the inner garden. It was a sacred space where stars were reflected on still water, and the air sang with soft energy. No guards were present, no advisors, just the two of them, and the sound of heartbeats in the open night. Joran sat beside her, silent at first. This place, he said slowly, feels alive. The queen nodded. It is. Every stone, every leaf, remembers the blood and breath of our ancestors. They listen even when we do not speak. She turned to face him. Her eyes shimmered like distant galaxies, and her hand found his. There is something I must ask you, she said. Not as your queen, as a woman. Joran's fingers curled around hers. Ask me anything. He replied. She took a breath, not because she was nervous, but because the moment deserved one. You returned my child, you saved my people, you stood against giants, and I have given you my title, my bond, and my trust. But I have not yet given you my heart. Joran looked at her carefully. Because you were waiting. For the moment it was real, not chosen by fate or counsel, but by feeling. She smiled. Yes, and that moment is now. She placed his hand over her chest where her heart pulsed slowly beneath her robes. He didn't speak. He just leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. There were no guards watching, no enemy approaching, just two souls who had survived war and choice, now facing something far more terrifying and powerful than either. Love. The queen's voice trembled now, softer than before. In our world, we do not take mates for power. We take them for legacy. And I want my legacy to be more than peace or rule. I want it to be you. Joran whispered only one word. Yes. And it was. Enough. The following sunrise carried golden light across the palace. The queen announced her decision before her people. But it surprised no one. By now, they had seen how Joran walked among them. Not above, not behind, but beside. The royal child giggled and reached for him during the announcement. The moment was captured and broadcast across systems. To the people of Elendar, it was not just a human holding a royal child. It was a father embracing the future. The queen took his hand and declared it official. By voice, by vow, and by blood shared in battle, I name him consort of the crown and protector of our legacy. The hall erupted in a glow of lights, and chants from every level of society. Even distant systems sent transmissions of blessing. Some offered alliances, others quiet envy. But no one challenged the queen's will. The Takari remained silent, their threat now buried under the weight of unity and respect. That evening, Joran stood alone in the Hall of Binding once more. He placed his hand on the same pillar where the bond had begun. This time, he felt not the test, but the truth. He was no longer the outsider who had walked through fire. He was one of them, and they were his. Time passed, and the skies over Elindar grew quiet again. No enemies crossed their borders. No ships threatened their peace. The world had changed, not through conquest or fear, but through a decision made by two people who chose love over power. Joran now stood not as a soldier, not even as a consort, but as a symbol of unity. His face appeared in learning halls, in murals painted by alien artists, and in the tales whispered to younglings under glowing trees. Yet he never saw himself as more than a man who stayed when he could have left. The queen stood taller than ever, not because of the crown on her head, but because of the hand she held beside her. She ruled with strength, wisdom, and now, with something her people had never seen before, a partner who shared the weight, not just the title. The child they both loved grew stronger with each sunrise. Her eyes carried the queen's fire and Joran's steady calm. She spoke in both languages, played with human toys, and walked barefoot across the palace gardens as if she already owned the stars. One day, the queen called for a gathering, not just her advisors or nobles, but leaders from across the neighboring systems. The hall was filled with faces, some friendly, some cautious, all curious. Joran stood behind her as she addressed them. For generations, we've built walls between species, she said. Out of fear, out of pride, out of old wounds passed down like law. But today I show you something stronger than walls. She turned and extended her hand to Joran. He stepped forward without hesitation. The hall watched in silence as the human and the alien queen stood together, fingers interlocked. This is not a symbol, she continued. This is proof that trust is not weakness, that love is not surrender, that together we are more than survival. The silence broke into thunderous sound. Applause, cheers, signals beamed across space with the queen's message. In that moment, a decision was made not by treaty or technology, but by hearts that had dared to meet in the middle. After the gathering, Joran walked the outer gardens with the queen and their daughter. The stars above seemed brighter, as if the universe itself had heard and agreed. The queen leaned against his shoulder, her voice soft and honest. I feared I would never find someone who understood me, she said. Not as a ruler, not as a mother, just as a woman. But you did. Joran smiled and kissed her temple. I didn't come to change your world. I just wanted to protect what was already good in it. That night, the child asked a question as she stared at the moons. Will I be human or Elindari when I grow up? Joran crouched beside her and smiled. You'll be both, and that will make you stronger than either alone. The queen nodded, placing her hand on the girl's head. The child laughed and ran through the moonlit grass. Her giggles echoed like music. Behind her, the two stood hand in hand, silent but full. Their legacy had begun not in war, but in rescue, not in conquest, but in choice, and now it would carry through the stars. Years passed, and the story of the human who returned a royal child spread far beyond Elindar. Other planets began exchanging culture, stories, and even love. Human and Elindari marriages rose. Trade flourished. Fear turned into curiosity. Curiosity into friendship. Statues were built in the capital. One of the queen, proud and strong. One of Joran, steady and brave. And between them, a child holding both their hands. It stood not as a monument to rulers, but as a promise to generations not yet born. Joran never asked for reward or recognition, but on his final day, as the sun dipped behind the towers, the queen sat beside him and whispered, You saved my daughter, but more than that, you saved me. His last breath left with peace on his face and her hand in his. In the end, he had come to return a child, but he stayed to build a future.